I don't know if my crystal ball is in better focus than anyone else that I can predict, but I think we are having big surprises this year. I mean, who would have thought at the beginning of the year that Sam Brownback would be struggling for re-election in Kansas, such a strongly Republican state in what is still a Republican year? Who would have thought Democrats, conversely, would be having a hard time holding on to the governorship in Massachusetts? I mean, that's a dead heat right now. So we're definitely going to wake up on November 5th with some surprises.
I think that the Massachusetts paid sick leave has the most national significance, at least for the beats that I cover. Connecticut is the only state to currently have a paid sick leave law. As I mentioned before, the law has been found to have a relatively small impact on most businesses in the state, and the reason for that is that they had huge carve-outs so that it really only applied to something like 12 to 18% of workers in the state. Massachusetts would not have quite the same level of carve-outs, and so it's going to be a really valuable case study in whether statewide paid sick leave laws are good for business or bad for business, and also what kind of benefits they have for public health. The thing that's interesting about paid sick leave is that almost 40% of private workers nationally do not have paid sick leave. And then when you look at certain sectors, like the service industry, it's something like 60% don't have paid sick leave. And so there are going to be certain parts of the country that are really interested in this, because if you were to have a national paid sick leave law, or if this caught on and spread through other states around the country, then could have a major impact, especially in certain industries.
A lot of people do look to California for a lot of things, and not very many states so far have tried to address their revenue volatility this specifically. There's really only a handful of states that have mandated policies for their rainy day funds, and an even smaller handful of states that try and tie volatility to those policies, like Pew Research really likes states to do. And so if California does this, then I would not be surprised to see other states do this as well.
There are questions that have been largely resolved in state law, but of course there are things that are quite energizing for Democratic voters. There's a question, for instance, a non-binding question that wouldn't really change anything, but it asked voters, do you think that employers who cover prescription drugs should also have to cover birth control? And there's a law dating back to 2003 that already requires that. But this question asks voters if they think that their employer who's already doing this should have to do this. So that's kind of fed criticism that it's just entirely designed to drum up voters. There's another one relating to the minimum wage, which hasn't been able to make tons of headway, raising the minimum wage, that is, which hasn't been able to make much headway in the legislature. There are a lot of bread and butter Democratic issues that are kind of being used to bring out supporters for Pat Quinn. It's not as though that there have never been non-binding ballot questions. It's the sheer number of them, I think, that's drawing some concern. It's also partly the timing. It's the fact that so many coincide during a time where there's a lot of disenchantment with Democratic governance in Illinois, and that's statewide. It's not just the governor, but I mean, it's a state that has some fairly serious fiscal issues and some questions about corruption.